Is this in your top 5 Bond movies?
It's in my top 3. I kind of battle between it and From Russia with Love to be my favorite for different reasons. From Russia with Love has that great Cold War feeling to it. It's Spectre manipulating East against West. While this is quite a modern spy thriller, I really loved how it kicked the series in the ass, to move along in a new direction. So it kind of blew my mind watching it in the cinemas because I loved it from beginning to end.
Yeah, the same. My other favorite, I would say, is For Your Eyes Only, probably. And I can't really choose between them. It's kind of amazing. The series has been going for over half a century, and it's not really a truly bad film. If you look at other franchises, there are really sort of bottom of the barrel movies, and there is peaks, of course. But if you look at the official series, I mean, for sure, some are better than others, but there's nothing, for me anyway, that is truly, truly awful. But I would say this probably, The Spy Who Loved Me is probably my top 3, I would guess. so it's terrific, and I remember going out from the cinema and saying to my father that was like the best Bond ever, and I still stand by that opinion. What has Bond meant for you? The character, the movies, the books. What was your first experience with a Bond movie?
The first experience I had with James Bond in any genre or situation was the video game GoldenEye 64. Because I just got a new friend because our 2 classes have been joined together back in primary school. So I was at his friend's house. He had lots of video games, and we ended up playing GoldenEye for hours. And then he said, "Do you want to watch the movie?" And I was like, "There's a movie?" And that kind of started it all, because we watched GoldenEye, and I discovered that we had some recorded at home. I knew that what the context was for those titles, and we started recording it from TV. So I kind of loved Roger Moore and Pierce Brosnan growing up, because they has had those. Well, maybe not GoldenEye, but they always had the kind of child-friendly, adventurous spirit to them. And later on, as you matured, you go into Connery, you go into Lazenby.
The first Bond movie I remember seeing was on VHS, and it was Moonraker. And I remembered the scene where Bond gets pushed out of the plane, and I think my mom explained, "That's Jaws," and I was like, "Who's Jaws?" Because I hadn't seen Spy Who Loved Me yet. Suddenly with this giant character with steel teeth, and it just captured my imagination. And Roger Moore was sort of my Bond, or is my Bond, because his movies were the ones I tended to watch the most, mainly on VHS. And the first cinema experience with Bond was License to Kill in '89. And I was really excited because there was all these rumors going about that this was not your typical Bond. This was so intense and so violent. There was actually rumors that people were getting picked up by ambulances at the cinema and being driven off to the ER because it was so intense that people had like panic reactions. And that, of course, piqued my interest even more. So that was so I was 13 when I snuck in to watch License to Kill. And I thought it was just awesome. And Timothy Dalton is also a great Bond, of course. And since then, I watched every Bond in the cinema. So it's been a huge part of my film interest. So Casino Royale, of course, it's a book written by Ian Fleming, the first James Bond book, published in 1953. And to do like a short recap of the story, it's about a Russian agent, a smirch agent called De Chiffre, living in France. He has lost a lot of money belonging to the Communist Party, and now he's trying to recoup his losses by setting up a high-stakes baccarat card game in France. And Bond's mission is he will join the game and try to clean Le Chiffre out. So Le Chiffre will have nowhere to go, and the Communist Party will be humiliated as this scandal is exposed in the press. And Bond also meets Vesper Lynd, a woman he falls in love with, but it all ends in tragedy. So I guess that's sort of the bare bones of the story. But of course, it would take almost 50 years more than 50 years for this book to have a proper film adaptation by Ian Productions. So why was that? Why did it take so long for this book to become, well, a proper movie?
Yeah, because it did start as an episode of a TV series called Climax, which adapted the different kinds of books and short stories into 1 hour of live television, which has one tiny problem. There isn't really a James Bond, a British Secret Service agent named James Bond. We do get the American agent, Carsten's Jimmy Bond, which is kind of an odd thing, but you have to remember this is 1950s USA. How much would an American TV audience have cared about a British agent compared to one of their own?
Well, maybe we should just talk a little bit about the TV version. It was done in 1954, and it was actually a live performance, believe it or not. And Barry Nelson played Bond. He actually refers to himself to, I discovered, as James Bond, but his friends call him Jimmy Bond. Some interesting names here. Barry Nelson, of course, we will see also as the hotel manager in The Shining a couple of decades later. Jerry Goldsmith did the score, who would, of course, to have an illustrious career with Alien, Total Recall, and a whole bunch of other movies. And we have Peter Lorre playing Le Chiffre. I must say, I mean, it's sort of maybe popular to make fun of this sort of TV episode, but for what it's worth, I think it has some good points.
Yeah, it's a nice concentration. It kind of bottlenecked it into two locations. You get Bond's hotel room, and you get the casino mostly. So it does effectively narrow down hits the points of the story. It only lacks, the James Bond connection.
Yes, and it was actually, I discovered, it was done in color originally.
Yeah, I heard that as well.
Yeah, so it's available on YouTube. But what they did was, because back then there wasn't a technology for actually recording television programs. What they did was they set up a camera, filming a sort of at the time, high quality monitor. So it's actually on film. So they shot it on film, shooting the monitor. But I think Barry Nelson, he sort of plays it as it's sort of a standard 50s pulp hero sort of a deal, more cowboyish maybe. But I think he looks the part. He's just not very refined. I think probably he could have potentially made a good Bond if he had more training, but for what it's worth, I think they actually do a better job in the TV episode explaining the card game, than the book, because the book goes page up and page down explaining Baccarat, and I sort of got lost, honestly, when I read the book.
Yeah, it helps that I began reading books between waiting for Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. So in the last 20 years, I've read it quite a few times. I do get the idea behind how Baccarat works.
Yes, and
I think the strongest point of the TV episode is actually Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre, because it does quite a lot with not maybe perhaps such a fleshed out character, but his presence adds quite a bit to it. So it's a shame that they never really got a chance to play a Bond villain against Sean Connery.
Oh, I agree. And there's also, of course, in the book and in the film with Daniel Craig, there is a torture scene, and there is a torture scene in the television episode, but it's sort of a bit refined.
What I think it is they imply that they remove his toenails. Still kind of gruesome for 1950s TV, but not as violent and disturbing as having his 00 smashed.
That's right. Yeah, we will get to that scene. So, what happened? What happened after that with the book and the rights?
Yeah, we have to relocate ourselves to Africa in the 1950s, where film production was going on. But one of the actors/producers there was a Russian fellow named Gregory Ratoff. And he, among others, was stealing money like crazy from this picture, because Fox was throwing money at it to finish it. And all the producers and actors went, yeah, it goes in my pocket. But the problem is, there was a revolution in Egypt back then. So how do you get all this money out without the costumes claiming it? So some bought diamonds, and Ratoff decided, no, he's going to sew the cash into his suit jacket. So what he did was he made an oath. If I get through this, I will take the first book I read a positive review of, buy the rights, and make a good adaptation. And of course, he picked up Time magazine on the plane and read a review of Casino Royale. Contacted Ian Fleming and he got the rights. So he spent the 50s going from screenwriter to screenwriter, producer to producer, tried to flow with different directors. He had Ben Hecht, who wrote a few of the 1930s Alfred Hitchcock movies, and through that he tried to have Alfred Hitchcock direct it. But nothing really happened until he met a producer called Charles K. Feldman. And Feldman, of course, bought half the rights just to help Gregory have to stay afloat economically, because his health was failing. He needed to pay medical bills and all that, so he loaned him money throughout the years. And then Gregory Ratoff passes away in 1960. And Charles K. Feldman does a favor to his widow and forgives quite a bit of debt and then buys the rights. And then he would spend a few years trying to get Howard Hawks and different kinds of writers involved. And it isn't until Dr. No hits screens that suddenly owning James Bond rights is lucrative. So what happens next is the Eon Production has two problems ahead of them, because one side, Charles Feldman owns Casino Royale. And through a legal battle for over the years with Ian Fleming, Kevin McClory now owns the rights to Thunderball. So what you can have now is a situation that in a year there are 3 Bond pictures competing with one another. So what do Ian Productions do? They try to negotiate with Feldman first. Problem is that Charles K. Feldman is a bit greedy. For every dollar that the money earns, he wants 60%. Quite insane for Cubby and Harry to accept something like that. So Charles K. Feldman decides, no, he tries still one last shot to make a serious Bond film, because he says that Sean Connery has decided to make You Only Live Twice his final Bond film. Connery says, okay, give me $1 million. And Feldman backs away and thinks, no, I just spoof it. I just do a big old grand spoof, kind of in the same vein they did What's New Pussycat a few years earlier. And what happens is you get a disaster of a spoof movie that doesn't know how to spoof James Bond properly.
I saw it about 3 years ago, and I guess I should have maybe rewatched it for this podcast, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
The only part that movie has in common with the actual book, the story it adapts, is a small portion where they had a card scene, which has Peter Sellers going up against Orson Welles, but they hated each other, so it's more interesting to see the scene and realize they're not in the same picture very much.
Right. I know also that there is sort of an epilogue to this story, because Feldman met Sean Connery a couple of years later, right? And explained to him that...
The next year, because the movie came out in 1967 and Feldman passes away in 1968. Time before he passes away, he meets Sean Connery at a party and goes up to him and say, you know, it would have been a hell of a lot cheaper to get you those $1 million.
Yeah. I mean, and that could have been... I mean, imagine a Casino Royale from the 60s with Sean Connery, but it's one of those what-ifs that's sort of all through the Bond series. There's been these what-ifs, what if that had happened, what if that. So we can finally... we can leave talking about the parody, thank goodness.
There is a funny story about a screening in Boston, because Columbia reached out to upstart radio station there. We have a movie that we want to promote. We don't think it's really good. We don't really think it would be a hit. Could you do something about it to spice it up? And the DJ thought, how about we have a spy screening? Anyone who shows up in dark glasses and a trench coat goes in for free. Problem is that Boston is a college town, and a lot of teenagers and young people listen to these radio stations. So there were like 10,000 people out there trying to get into this one small theater to watch the movie. So everything turned into a riot. It started flipping cars, torch mailboxes, police had to get involved. So it was a disastrous PR for what is a disaster of a movie. So kind of ironic.
Yeah, yeah. And I from what I understand, those who saw the movie actually got in. They hated the movie as well, and that's sort of
they kind of leave and started.
They wanted to burn some cars as well after seeing the movie.
Yeah, so the rights stuck split a bit between United Artists and Columbia after that, I think, but Columbia had Charles K. Feldman stakes in it, so that's why they didn't really move forward with a new adaptation of it for all those years after. It wasn't until in the 90s Kevin McClory tried to do another Thunderball remake, where he did have a discussion with Sony about, hey, you have a book, I have a book. How about we do our own series, we can compete? Which turned into a legal battle back then, which ended up in that MGM and Columbia, Sony then, traded Spider-Man and Casino Royale, and that's how we go to 2006. Right. This was in 2002, so we were still waiting for Die Another Day when they finally had the rights back.
We have, of course, 2002, Die Another Day had come out. It was very successful. Not very highly regarded among fans and critics. It was sort of the Moonraker of its time, very fantastical CGI, which had been used previously on Bonds for like set extensions and so on. But now it was sort of front and center with the infamous surfing scene and everything. And I guess the Bond series was in a bit of at a crossroads now. Where do we go from here? Because if we go even more fantastical, it's going to get really, really silly.
I remember both. They had this event for the 40th anniversary where they screened the movie for a celebrity audience. All Bonds were there. And I remember both George Lazenby and Roger Moore was a bit negative about it. I remember Lazenby thought that was a bit childish, you know, they're doing it for the kids now. And Roger Moore had that famous quote, yeah, I think they went a bit too far, and that's coming from the first Bond in space.
Yes. Yeah, and Roger Moore has always been a great promoter of the Bond series. So when even he is critical, you know that movie maybe is not exactly up to snuff. But it was Pierce Brosnan's fourth Bond movie, and he was meant to come back for a fifth time. So they started developing a screenplay based on Casino Royale with him in mind.
What I think would have been the case there is, how do you handle the tragedy? Because in the book and the final movie, the tragedy of Vesper is what motivates Bond to narrow down what his purpose as a spy is. As is pointed out in the book, is one go after the hand that holds the whip and the gun, the spy that makes spy. Mm-hmm. But if you have done it with Brosnan, would it have ended in tragedy? It would have more been like he retires with Vesper. Because how would that death affect him? Because I probably think it would be too much of a repeat of Tracy, because he's sort of, even though they soft rebooted with Dalton, is meant to have been married in the past.
Yes, yeah, it was still the original sort of timeline with the marriage to Tracy and her death. Screenwriters are Neil Purvis and Robert Wade, of course, with later revisions by Paul Haggis. But those guys, and Wade and Purvis started writing, but I think they eventually came to a mutual agreement that this would be a better fit for a younger guy, a new Bond. So the idea, and this was a big gamble at the time, to essentially reboot the entire series. There had been, I guess you could say, a couple of reboots, soft reboots along the way. I mean, you could argue that after A View to a Kill with Roger Moore, when we go into the Timothy Dalton, The Living Daylights, it's sort of a reboot.
Yeah, a soft reboot. Like, they still acknowledge that the story's behind it. He's been married, it's all that, but he's kind of younger now. This is more like a hard reboot, one of the first in the modern cinema era. Because the year earlier we had Batman Begins, and then now Casino Royale carried that torch by hard resetting everything.
Well, I guess Pierce Brosnan, he wasn't fired, but his contract wasn't extended. He was on a picture-by-picture basis. Yeah,
the standard Bond contract has always been, since Roger Moore, you sign for free, then you get the option to buy to do the next one and the next one, so you can negotiate your salary and all that to going forward.
Yeah. And then, of course, well, the hunt for a new Bond began. And there was a couple of pretty prominent actors being tried out for this. It was Henry Cavill was one of them, Sam Worthington, Carl Urban, and Martin Campbell, who had, of course, directed GoldenEye, decided to come back. And he tells the story that they actually used the first scene in the movie where Bond confronts Dryden was actually one of the scenes that they used to audition new actors.
Yeah, and there is, I think, Apple TV produced documentary about Daniel Craig's tenure, where you can see that he did the whole I'm the money, every penny discussion, but in a hotel room. And then, of course, there is the standard scene that I always use for a Bond audition that sometimes gets real, sometimes not, is the famous scene from Russia with Love when it's introduced to Tatiana.
So eventually Daniel Craig is cast as Bond, and with that comes quite a big backlash.
Yeah, because as you said, they simply didn't renew Brosnan's contract for a fifth. That the tabloids really put it out that he was fired, so a lot of young fans and older fans were kind of furious that, hey, you fired our great Bond and put in this brute-looking blonde fellow. And it's kind of crazy that one thing they really hang up on was the hair color.
Yes.
Like Eva Green pointed out, he can't act because he's blonde. What the fuck is that about? Yeah, I'm kind of ashamed to admit as a naive teenager, critiquing the source, but wasn't exactly on my mind. So I kind of bought into all those bullshit headlines that he can't drive, he was injuring himself, he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. I mean, the tabloids really had a field day trying to bash him down and make the fans turn against him.
Yeah, and there was this website also, Craig Not Bond, which got a lot of attention, some sort of homepage, but that was taken down eventually. But I read in an interview with Craig that he had unfortunately went to that website to look at it, and he didn't deserve that backlash. And me myself, I was sort of, I had seen him in I remember him mostly from Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks, where he plays a sort of a mafia boss's son, and he was really good in that part. But that was sort of my image of Daniel Craig. I was like, I'm not sure, because Brosnan was so perfect in the part. It turned out I was very, very wrong. I wasn't necessarily against Craig. I was just sort of weary about, I don't know, is this the right guy? But then, of course, he's a great actor, and he really beefed up for the role as well. I mean, he really looked like a professional killer when I started shooting.
The thing that turned me around was seeing those behind the scenes clips they shot up where he was training for a stairwell fight, and I went, damn, he's really giving it his all. And I started thinking, what the hell am I on about? It's not that he is out here to destroy the Bond image. He wants to do a great job, and you can tell there. So that was when the thing started to turn in my head. And then, of course, the amazing trailer came out, which really started to sell the whole thing that, this is a new kind of Bond film.
You can feel like there is a lot going on behind the eyes. It's a more emotional Bond, for sure. Maybe almost mirroring a bit what Timothy Dalton did. You can really buy into the fact that he is James Bond. You can really feel like, no, this guy is dangerous. Yeah,
and you also get that they lean a whole bit into how he's written, how he's placed it into the idea that this is his first mission as a 007. And we get reference to the murders he has to do to become a 00 in the book. But the pre-title sequence show it. And there we get that brutal side of the character. They blunt instruments who sent out to take care of a problem. First Dryden's contact, and then Dryden himself. And there's that brilliant line, made it feel it, didn't you? Needn't worry. The second is, considerably. Yeah. That sets a great tone for what his Bond is. And as you point out, it is a bit like Timothy Dalton in his two movies. That scene rhymes quite fantastically with the sniper scene in Living Daylights. Actually, I have one final statement I kind of want to make.
Sure.
I do feel like Daniel Craig perhaps is most confident Bond in his debut since Sean Connery. Sean Connery had the fortune of being trained into the role by Terrence Young. So he had that confidence going in, but you can see, if you compare with other Bonds in the debut, Daniel Craig doesn't struggle as much and feels more confident, say, than Brosnan, that can be a bit stiff in GoldenEye. You have Timothy Dalton really struggling with one-liners that is more written in Living Daylights. And Lazenby kind of getting off the whole "this never happened to the other fellow" energy. So I do think that Craig has the most confident debut since Connery.
I guess even Timothy Dalton was sort of trying to find his footing with the Living Daylights. I guess they usually say that the Bond actors tends to peak at the third movie, and that they usually where they really find their footing. But some of them have been better out of the gate than others. So should we talk about maybe some of the rest of the cast? Of course, a hero is only as good as the villain or the antagonist, and here we have Mads Mikkelsen, of course, playing Le Chiffre. Doesn't maybe necessarily look as he is described in the book, where he's more of a pudgy character, a bit more. I guess he looks a bit more like Peter Lorre in the TV version. If you want to compare the book to the screen, Mads Mikkelsen is much more sophisticated. He's very sort of minimalistic in his acting, but he feels dangerous for sure. But when you think about it, I mean, he's involved in, I guess, a little bit of action, but his main stay in the film is at the poker table, where there's a lot of acting with the eyes and the hands.
What helps Mads Mikkelsen is that he has that intimidating glare, which is really helpful when you have that poker scene, because he looks a bit from beneath the brow, stares at Bond, hands there. You see the cogs turning without actually having the eyes move really that much. Yeah,
and I think you told me, I didn't know this, but you told me a story that Mads Mikkelsen was quite an accomplished poker player himself.
Yeah, they did an interview back in the day, and they did one recently where, you know, all those channels that have them react to their old roles and all that.
Mm-hmm.
He drops a little anecdote there that it's felt, as a poker player, it's felt kind of crazy looking down and see those hands. So you have to really think about acting like, oh shit. But what I also so it says that everyone around the table has crazy hands. Like, you don't get those. And then they also dropped that little golden nugget that everyone around that table knew how to play poker well, except one guy, Daniel Craig. He wasn't good at all. And I haven't found it, but I remember there was a short interview clip where someone asked Daniel why Mads was a better poker player than him, and he laughingly said, because he cheats.
And, well, we have, of course, the leading lady, or the Bond girl, Eva Green, who had come off, among other things, The Kingdom of Heaven, by Ridley Scott. Also a great casting. The Vesper in the book is, well, she is active, but she's nowhere near as feisty, and she doesn't really talk back to Bond. She's more of a reactive character. She is kind of a blank page that reacts to things Bond does mostly.
For sure. You don't get to know her that well, but they really give Eva Green dimensions to play with, and she is, as you point out, a great actress.
Yeah, and I think one thing I noticed, when we talk about like women in Bond pictures, if we compare to Halle Berry or Denise Richards, they always have these scenes where you see a lot of their body. In this movie, the camera sort of focuses more on Daniel Craig. He has two scenes where he goes to bathe and of course the title sequence is all about him, so it's much less focus on sort of the, I guess, what if you could say the female figure or the female body. Here it's mostly Danny Craig. I mean, Eva Green, she gets into a couple of beautiful outfits, but she doesn't get objectified, I guess you can say.
No, not to the same extent as back in the olden days, because the Bond girl always had to look tip-top in every scene, in some of them. Here you actually see her in the bathroom putting on makeup, getting ready and all that, and also quite a great scene how it's a back and forth between her and Bond. Like, he shows up with that dress, she needs to look sexy for the table so she can distract the other players. Yeah. Then Bond leaves, walks into his room, and suddenly there's a tailored tuxedo there because she thought that his one wasn't fancy enough.
Yeah. So that I mean, the movie hinges on that relationship working, and I think it works. It works really great. I mean, I guess you can mention, we sometimes talk about when we talked about Batman, our sort of, maybe if we had any controversial takes. I would argue maybe, and this sounds weird, I know, but their first scene, they have great chemistry, but it's almost like the scene is almost overwritten because they're just throwing one-liners at each other and all these insights into each other, and it's almost like they kick things off so fast. And she tells him, she can tell just by his suit, tell him his whole backstory. And I think maybe some of it is just a bridge too far. I mean, it's a minor quibble, but I just thought that maybe that scene was slightly overwritten.
Yeah, it is the sharpest interaction when it comes to line deliveries and how the lines match each other. It kind of reminds me a bit about the screwball comedy days of Hollywood, and only played straight this time because it's really about the power play between them, and she's putting him in place because he acts kind of superior, a bit like Bond in the books, but he is more open to her presence and her intelligence here because she is an intelligence character.
Yeah,
you pointed out quite a sexist comment by Bond in the books when he is introduced to Vesper.
Yeah, I think maybe I can, because we're gonna talk a little bit more about the differences with the book and the finished movie. But I did want to read one sort of passage from the book where Bond has just found out that he's gonna have a woman, assistant on the mission. And so, quote, "And then there was this pest of a girl," he sighed. "Women were for recreation. On a job, they got in the way and fogged things up with sex and hurt feelings and all the emotional baggage they carried around. One had to look out for them and take care of them," end quote. So that's sort of Bond's view on women in the book. I mean, and also in the book, it sort of goes on a character arc, because he does start caring for her eventually. But obviously in the film, he's much more modernized, I guess you can say. He doesn't have a problem with women.
Yeah, Ian Fleming was a man of many controversial takes. He is definitely an old-fashioned kind of guy, to put it gently. I also think Bond's character arc in the books stems a bit from the fact that Ian Fleming himself was going from a womanizing bachelor life into his first marriage while he was writing this. So he was kind of trying to work out his anxieties, and by the end, Bond is ready to marry Vesper in the book. Sort of mirroring Ian Fleming getting ready for being married himself.
Yeah. And also when we talk about, I guess, one other, could you say Bond woman? Judi Dench came back as M, even though it doesn't really make sense. But on the other hand, this was a reboot, so there were not particular rules who you could cast and couldn't cast. And it's not the first time in the Bond series where we had returning actors playing different characters, like Charles Gray, for example, or Maud Adams. So what did you think of Judi Dench as M?
I think it's kind of easy to differentiate between the two M's she plays. Now I know, because of behind the scenes stuff, that there are two different characters by name also, because The novelization of GoldenEye mentions that her name is Barbara Maudsley, so M stands for Maudsley in that one, while the new M is Olivia Mansfield, which plays back to the scene where Bond breaks into her apartment here in this movie, because I think M was just randomly assigned a number or letter, but never thought it would mean either one was syllable and have you killed.
Yeah.
She gets a bit more angry here at Bond than she does against Brosnan's Bond. You can kind of see like how Robert Brown and Bernard Lee's M are two different M's in how they act towards Bond, because like Judi Dench in Daniel Craig, Bernard Lee's M starts a bit more antagonistic against Sean Connery's Bond, and he's up on him a little bit, while Robert Brown is more chill to begin with, and it becomes a bit more angry as it goes along, going into what Timothy Dalton does as James Bond. So you can see her sort of mirroring that she is bit Bernard Lee, and her other interpretation is a bit more Robert Brown.
It's a great cast. We have Jeffrey Wright playing Felix, and he would also return in subsequent films, and Giancarlo Giannani playing Mathis. I mean, what can one say? I mean, they slip right into their parts. Pretty perfectly.
What I like about them is they're kind of cool characters. Mathis in the books is more of a recurring character. He is like the European version of Leiter. As soon as Bond does something in Europe, Mathis is there. As soon as does something in the books in America, Leiter is there, which kind of pisses me off why they kill him in the next movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I read all the books in between.
Yes.
But they do a really great job. And what I like about Leiter in this movie, that they kind of carry that tradition, and whenever they get a new Felix Leiter character, we don't know that it's Felix right away. It's kind of revealed to us because they keep changing the actor.